Classical Conversations presents Refining Rhetoric with CEO Robert Bortons, a podcast where faith, business, politics, and classical education meet. Join us as we use the classical tools of rhetoric to seek truth in every arena of life.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Refining Rhetoric. Today, my guest is a friend of the show, a friend of the Bortons family, Courtney Sanford. Courtney is a dedicated homeschool mother who's guided her three children through classical conversations. You may have seen her name on some of our materials. And today we're going to talk about a couple things. One is just dispelling this myth that classical education is incompatible with STEM. She has one of her own graduates now, very close to becoming a doctor, and she'll talk a little bit about how she helped prepare him for that. And she's also associate professor of fine arts at Bryan College and holds a BA degree in environmental design. And so she has founded Delightful Art Co. It's an innovative online art school offering arts integrated classes, curricula, and retreats. And so we will be talking a little bit about that. And you can actually go to the episode from January 2nd of 2025, where she discusses this with Delise and Jenny on the Blessing and Motherhood podcast. And I understand when Courtney is not teaching or painting or playing with her grandchildren, she is planning her next trip to Europe. And of course, they've got beautiful art over there. Courtney, welcome to today's show.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, can you, I gave a lot of introduction, but tell us a little bit about homeschooling through high school with classical conversations and how that impacted your family.
We did not start out thinking we would be homeschoolers. We sent our kids off to a private Christian school, and I actually loved dropping off to and then taking the younger one home and playing with him. So it wasn't until we realized they just weren't learning much there. They were doing all Rebecca all the time, so it was just handing out worksheets, and they just got worksheeted to death. And we saw these bright lights in their eyes just kind of dim as they just lost interest in learning. And so we knew we needed to do something. And of course, my husband, Chris, is the ultimate DIY guy. So he was like, we could do this. How hard could that be? And so he was on board first. And I was like, I don't know about this. There's a lot to learn. And so I started asking friends. I knew friends at church who homeschooled, and they sent me to Classical Conversations, and there was one 3-day practicum that Lee was doing that summer. And I was like, okay, the last chance, I got to get in it. So I packed up the kids and we went to High Point, got a hotel, and we did the 3-day practicum. And it was a math practicum. And that is like my least favorite thing. And so I went in kind of with trepidation thinking, I don't know about this, but she used the classical model to teach me trigonometry. And after the second day, I called my husband and was like, I can do this. I get this. I know math now, and I think I can teach it. And I get the classical model. And at the same time, my kids were in these camps, and they were learning trigonometry, and they came out excited, and that little light that had dimmed was back on again. And I was sold. And so I just decided during that 3 days, whatever Lee says, I'm going to do. And so I kind of committed at that point that I was going to do whatever she said and stick with it all the way through.
Nice. Yeah. That's probably a pretty good thing in life. I always, Lee, my mom, founded Classical Conversations for those who don't know and who are listening. And I always say, I don't always understand what she says, but she's usually right. So if we're disagreeing, I try to take the approach that, okay, what am I missing? What am I not understanding first? And she's not fallible. None of us are. But that's a lot of people I think have had that same sort of thought. It's like, all right, it's worked out for us. And it worked out for you and your family, homeschooling through high school with Classical Conversations. When did you kind of feel like that you had a science-minded or math-minded student, and what were those things? Because a lot of people criticize classical education of not being strong in those areas.
I don't know that I thought about it at the time, but looking back now, he was obsessed with animals. And so if we were at the bookstore, he would beg for this great big book called The Animal Encyclopedia. And so we would buy him stuff like that and get library books, and he would read them cover to cover and then tell me all about the different animals, like all the details. And then he started drawing them. I would give him a piece of tracing paper and he would trace it. He was obsessed with this frilled lizard. And he traced it a few times, and then he learned how to draw it on his own, and then he could draw it from memory. And so I realized that drawing was helping him get to know the information better, slow down and look at all the details, and then commit it to memory. And so I experimented on my kids as well. I always saw Cece as it's like the Christmas tree, and it's my job to hang the ornaments on it. So I knew I had a good structure. I knew that it was going to be strong and hold up all the way through. But I got to add the ornaments and the fun stuff. So I added a lot of art because that's what I enjoy. And so we added a lot of art and a lot of play and a lot of because they were all interested in science, especially when she make it hands-on. And
Right.
so we did a lot of extra stuff like that. And our TV broke, that must have been a God thing. So watching something was not even an option. And so we turned to audiobooks and drawing and painting and things like that instead.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that a lot of people might not understand is in classical conversations, at least, we actually dissect frogs and animals and touch them and I think sharks and all sorts of stuff, owl pellets, and we're hands on. Art, of course, is hands on, and a lot of times now they're just watching dissections on TV screens or watching someone else do it in government schools and even private schools. So that whole idea of you need to use your five senses really to experience some things. I'm sure that's why you love going to Europe. And when you're just having a 2D image, or even if you get to the point where if 3D image is being projected to us, we're losing so much of that experience that can teach us to really love the world that God has given us. And I think that's a powerful thing to do, is really, like you said, he sounded like he kind of was following the classical model of what they would have done, 2,000 years ago or 1,000 years ago, of tracing the animals, learning about their details, comparing them to one another, and really intimately studying them, as opposed to just learning about it on some sort of video or something like that.
Yeah, the other thing that I incorporated was I took the idea from Nathaniel Bowditch when he made his own books. And so I had my kids make their own books on a subject. So you can buy inexpensive art journals at Michael's or on Amazon. They're just blank books. And then you let the kids fill it. And that's a lot more engaging, and they get a lot more enthusiastic about making their own illustrated book on a subject. And we actually did this in high school. We would use the Apologia text. And instead of using worksheets, which, I'm fundamentally opposed to a worksheet. So I know some people like them, but it did not work for us. They did not retain anything. We had that bad experience starting off with too many worksheets. So instead of the worksheets and the quizzes, I never gave a single science test to any of my kids. I thought it was a big waste of time. Instead, I had them make their own
Just
books.
the opposite of what the government tells you to do, right?
I know. And I was a little bit afraid to do it, but once I tried it, I could see the results immediately. They were so much more engaged and they learned so much more. So I'd buy them a blank book and they would read the Apologia text and then summarize it and then draw the illustrations and the diagrams in their own book. And they just used pencils and color pencils. James typed his summaries, but having to summarize the text is actually a lot harder than having to answer questions about it. You really have to absorb it and think about it and then put it down on paper. And they learned so much more and enjoyed it so much more. So I stand by that. We did that with all the textbooks in science, and I think it was just a great learning tool. He did one in marine biology in addition to all the other ones that we do in CC.
Yeah, marine biology, which is interesting. Is this the one? Because I know your family went and did kind of a gap year where they got their scuba certification and was a scuba dive instructor and teacher for a while.
Yeah, James had gotten his certification in Mexico on a family trip, and then when it was time to go to college, he just wasn't quite sure, and the price was so high, and he just couldn't nail down what major he wanted or what school he wanted to go to. And so he said he wanted to take a gap year, and we were like, "That's fine, but you can't stay here. You have to go somewhere." And so I just couldn't have him on my couch for a whole year doing nothing.
Yeah.
So we looked into gap year programs, which are very expensive, most of them, and we just kept looking and kept researching things. And we found this one, which is not technically a gap year program, but it was in Roatan, Honduras, and they would give you the training in exchange for working at the dive shop. And they also had a place for you to live and food to eat. So that was a great deal. We didn't have to pay anything. And he got all these classes. I think by the time he got up into instructor training, we had to pay some for that education. But he spent most of that year in Honduras. There was a monkey in the neighborhood. There was, they went lionfish hunting and just all kinds of neat experiences. And at the end of that, he was the youngest PADI scuba instructor in the world. So
Wow.
that was amazing. But
That is really cool.
yeah, so there was a lot of good things about that. It made him a 20-year-old freshman, which is a real bonus to boys. He was like the leader, and immediately all the other freshmen wanted to do whatever he was doing, and that's much better to be the leader than the follower. And then the professors could tell right away that he was engaged, he was paying attention, he was driven. And so they gave him positions as TAs and gave him positions in the lab that he wouldn't have gotten, I don't think, if he had been younger. He'd
already had that, like, I'll call it real world for the sake of a better word, but he's already had that experience of being out on his own and, earning money, being responsible, quite frankly, being responsible for people's lives if something goes wrong in a scuba diving incident. And, I saw on Twitter the other day, someone said, as dads, our responsibility should be to make sure our kids are always the oldest in anything that they do instead of the youngest, because it does give those leadership and those other opportunities. And I even remember growing up playing basketball. I graduated high school a year early. Obviously God has a plan for everything. Probably wasn't the wisest. I probably wasn't as responsible as I appeared to be when I graduated high school. But I knew, like, when I was entering in kind of middle school, high school age, all these kids I was playing with started getting held back so that they would be able to play in the same league multiple years and being held back in grades, so that instead of graduating at maybe 18, they were graduating at 19 because they had, college sports aspirations. And it's a lot better developmental wise to be going in as a freshman as a 19-year-old than, say, a 17-year-old like I went into.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of an interesting framework when we think about, like, all these people who want to push their kids. Oh, I want them to graduate high school when they're 16, or I'm going to put them in the local community college because it's free and I can get them out. They can have their AA when they're 18 and I can save them money. And I just think, like, what are you teaching them? Like, just because they can do something like that, is the education that robust that they're, like, that far ahead, or is that, education that weak that they're able to, get through it that quickly at such a young age? And yeah, how did y'all think about those decisions? James, we've got a few other kids. Did you think about those decisions differently for all your children, or did everybody take a gap year, or did it just kind of depend on their personalities and what they wanted to do?
Yeah, it depends on the kid. Josh, once we had seen how much better James did as being the oldest, we actually gave him a little gap year between foundations and challenge, so that he began challenge as an older kid. And that makes it easier on mom and easier on the kid to be a little bit more mature. So he got an extra year of foundations and essentials. And so he was a little bit older, but he was ready to go, and he knew what he wanted to do. He's always loved computer science. And so he was ready to get on with it. And Eleanor, you can't hold her back. She
No.
just wanted to be out. She found a college that spent a month in Italy, and she was like, "I'm gone." And then next thing we know, she's in
Come
Australia.
back from Italy.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, and so she's our global traveler.
Hey everyone, this is the part where I jump in to tell you about one of our sponsors, Delightful Art Company. Discover the joy of learning with Delightful Art Co. They have arts integrated classes, beautiful art books, and enthusiastic art teachers. Transform learning into a delightful experience by combining academics and creativity for all ages. Bring beauty and creativity into your homeschooling journey with cohesive illustrated books that make subjects come alive. Encourage and inspire students from around the world in live online classes. Registration is open now for summer and fall classes. Classical Conversations families enjoy $10 off any live class with the coupon code CCFAM10OFF. That's CCFAM10OFF. Visit delightfulartco.com and make learning delightful. That's delightfulartco.com. And go get that $10 off and join a live class today. Now, back to the show. Absolutely. For your youngest who did computer science, like what did y'all do any like different things with him when he was in high school? Was he already programming and learning those things? Because those aren't things that are offered through Classical Conversations, or did he find other places to work and find mentors? And of course, I know your husband is in that field, so
Yeah,
you have that resource right there.
he and his dad wrote a few things together, the little Hello World program, and we got some online things that would lead him step by step. Since Chris was on that, I wasn't really paying attention, so I'm afraid to even say the words. Is a BlackBerry a thing? Is there? I don't know. There's
That was a long
something
time ago.
or something that had to do with fruit that I don't know. So yes, they were playing around with that, but we always did a lot of hands-on stuff, and I think any kind of building and working on cars was a good foundation. We buy old cars, and if it breaks, they'll fix it together. So
Nice.
what they're doing now is they bought a short bus, and turned it into a camper over the summer. So Chris and Josh had to work on the engine. They had to work on the electronics. They installed solar panels. So there's a lot of electrical engineering that they had to learn. But I think Chris instilled in them he instilled in them this belief that we can Google it and figure it out. And I think that makes all the difference, is that they go out there, no matter what it is. They built trebuchets, full-size trebuchets when they were younger. And, they've built Da Vinci bridges, all that kind of stuff. And I think with computer science, understanding logic was important. So I was really glad that he had so much logic. One of the fun things that happened in his freshman year, he called, which is unusual, but he called and he asked me if I still had the logic book from Challenge B, because he was having an argument with the professor about the square of opposition. And he was right, and the professor had something wrong, which I'm really, I don't know if you want to challenge your professor. He's like, I'm sure he's wrong. So I sent him a picture of it, and he went to class early and he drew the square of opposition. I'm sure it was a minor detail, but these computer science people, like, it's either right or it's wrong, and there's no room for fuzziness. And so he wanted to get it absolutely right. So he went to class early, put the whole thing with all the details on the whiteboard, and they had a good discussion about that. And so I'm just so glad that that CC got us into logic, because I would not have chosen that for myself. I would have totally skipped that. I didn't see the beauty in that, but I think that's huge. And I think it's so sad that not every kid gets logic. And I'm glad that we have most of it.
Yeah, it's of course we just had an election, at least as of when this is being released. We're recording this before the election, but during election season, you wish everyone in America had a lot more logic, no matter which politician or group of people.
Yes, or at least at least not an aversion to logic. If we were open to logic, that would be a good thing. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Just don't, yeah.
yeah,
Just open to the idea of it.
yeah, yeah.
Nice.
So all that and the math I thought was good. Of course, I didn't. The kids learned that they could figure math out for themselves quicker than I could figure it out for them, which I
Mm,
think that's an advantage. You know, when they're first, second, third grade, I can answer the question. After sixth or seventh grade, they realize they can find the answer in the book faster than I can find the answer in the book. And so I'm like,
mm.
you're welcome for giving me that skill that you can figure it out for yourself. I mean, I'm happy to, but I am slow. So
Yeah.
that was good. And then they learned not to ask their dad unless they wanted a 2-hour dissertation on the subject, which that's
Mm.
where it goes if you ask dad. Like he's like, oh, let's talk about that in detail.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, I don't have time for this. So they learn to figure it out on their own, which is funny because you wouldn't think that an artist could raise kids who do so well in college. But there's something good about art. Art makes things engaging and interactive. And so when I bring art into a subject, they get more engaged. And I think it just makes
Right.
learning a lot more enjoyable. So I think that had something to do with
Yeah. Well, I think about like just that, Dorothy Sayers essay that we love and how they talk about watertight bulk, how she talks about watertight bulkheads and how people don't see how things interact with each other. And, the math map that's being released, and we just released one and multiple ones are on the way this spring. We've incorporated a lot of art into the math books themselves. So hopefully, you might be able to go through that with your grandchildren one day. But I mean, if you think about like Da Vinci and you think about how he's a great scientist, well, he was also a great artist because he had to draw everything out by hand and understand those things. And yeah, you just think about any of those Renaissance individuals and just that classical model. It involves drawing and art and incorporating those additional senses. So it's almost it's modern society that's put this idea on us, and yeah, it's been incredible. And it sounds like both of you and your husband working together to create really a love of learning and how to learn atmosphere for your homeschooling environment where, hey, we're not good at this, or I'm not, maybe this isn't my expertise. So you're better off figuring it out on your own. And, Chris, your husband, diving in and, hey, let's get hands on. Let's rebuild this engine. Let's install these solar panels ourselves. Let's not be afraid of, hey, instead of going to a gap year that we have to pay for, let's see if we can get a gap year that will pay us, or, gave a job opportunity for your kid. And of course, there's classes and things involved with all that as well. So it sounds like a life well lived, that you are living fully and not having to be conformed or confining yourself to, the bureaucratic calendar, or, the four walls of a school building dictating what you all are doing on a daily basis. And that human flourishing has allowed your kids to really flourish now as adults. And knowing your youngest and how introverted he was growing up, and the fact that he's now challenging professors when they're wrong, just kind of delights me and shows that ability to have that conversation and those skills really impacted him.
That's right. He has come a long way. He would probably choose not to talk now,
Sure.
but if there's something important, he will talk. And so of course CC gave him lots of opportunities to talk starting at such a
Yeah.
young age. So that was a big blessing. And then we added on Christian Youth Theater, and at one point he got the leading role in a play, and my whole family bought tickets because they wanted to come hear his voice. They had never heard his voice before. And here he was on stage in a musical, singing and dancing and reciting lots and lots of lines. So I don't think he would have gotten there if it hadn't been for that. In CC every week, giving a presentation and then doing debates and reciting Shakespeare lines it's just so consistent across so many years that it really it built up a skill in a kid who wouldn't have chosen that. He wouldn't have chosen speaking, but it was a safe environment too, you know.
Well, tell us a little bit. I mean, you've got the homeschool bona fides. You have kids that are really flourishing as adults. You've got a love and a skill of art, and you have a deep knowledge of teaching. And so you've turned that into a company, Delightful Art Co. So tell us a little bit about that, and if we have what age groups it for, and those details.
Well, we are online, which is an unusual situation, and that wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for the shutdown. So I was teaching Challenge 2, and I was enjoying Western cultural history with Challenge 2, in which we study a lot of artists and we write papers. And I was also teaching an in-person class where we were painting and drawing and doing graphic design in person with paint and pens and stuff like that. And that year, I had some kids in both classes. And one day, one of the students said, "Mrs. Sanford, why do we write papers about art? Why don't we do art in art history class?" And I was like, "Why don't we?" And so that got the wheels going. And I remembered my favorite class in college was the history of architecture, in which we bought blank books and we filled them from taking notes and drawing and drawing what we saw in art history. And so I went through and I picked what I thought were the 30 most important pieces of art, and I put them in chronological order. And then I came up with an art project that went along with each one. So I began this class, and it was during the shutdown. So I went online thinking, well, this will just be temporary. But once I figured it out, I had to buy some equipment. I have extra cameras and lighting and some extra things that make it work. But it just blossomed. And I had a lot of friends in CC all over the country. And my first info meeting, I had 50 people come. And that
Wow.
first year, I had about 100 students. And it just really took off. And the next year, I had requests for classes for younger people. So I found a friend that I knew from the theater who had a degree in English and art. And so I got her set up and she started teaching classes, and it's just grown every year. So now we have 7 teachers and about 300 students in live classes that are over Zoom. They meet once a week, and each class is aligned with another academic subject. So you're not adding art as a subject onto all the other things you're doing. You're integrating it into what you were doing already. And then
Wow.
it helps the kids remember what it is you wanted them to learn in history or science or whatever. So we have a biology class that's doing really well this year. And we have an ancient history class. And this week we are drawing hieroglyphics and learning how to paint with acrylics. So you have a fine art objective and a learning objective in that other academic subject. So that becomes the history
Two
lesson
for
for the
one.
day. Yeah.
Nice. Now, are these like, do you sign up for, are these individual lessons or group lessons? And then do you sign up for like blocks, like you're signing up for 15 weeks, or are you signing up for a month at a time? Like what are some of those logistical
Yeah,
things parents would need to know?
we do group classes. So depending on the age, the older kids, we can have a bigger class, and with the younger kids, it's a little bit smaller class. And they're interactive. So we ask the kids a get to know you question every week. So they get to meet these kids from all over the world. And then it depends on the age. The younger classes will meet about 12 weeks a semester, just like foundations and essentials, just because that's what I know, what I'm familiar with. So they do 12 weeks each semester, and the high schoolers will do 15 weeks each semester. And you can sign up for one semester at a time, or you can sign up for the whole year. In fact, we just launched a sale. If people wanted to join in January, they can start a class in January and go through until May and do the second semester. So
Nice.
it would be a familiar format to CC friends.
Do you have any, is it just all homeschoolers, or is it something that private school or public school families could partake in?
Well, I was really hoping to get public school or private school kids to join. I have not had many, but next year we're going to have some evening classes, so maybe that'll draw some more in. Um, but primarily we're homeschool kids, mostly just because that's who I know. And I go to the homeschool conferences. So I don't really know how to reach the others, but they're
Yeah.
welcome. Yeah. The other thing that I'm excited about is if a student is with me for a few years, some of them like to come and be interns with me. And so I have my interns help out in lots of different ways, depending on their skills. But this summer, I had a group of interns do a book week with me, and they did all the art projects for our latest book. And so we're working on having a book that goes with every class. So we did an ancient history class this summer. And it was a good experience for the interns to see how, we had to talk about how to teach art and how to break down a lesson and how to present it. And then they did the artwork and they photographed it step by step. So it was a good experience for them. And now it's a great tool for the kids who are taking ancient history. Or you could use the book without the class and just do the art lessons at home. And I found really great artifacts from the time period. So you have these big glossy photos of artifacts that they can look at. So I really feel like that's one way we can load their brains with lots of beautiful things. And so you can't have beauty come out if you don't have beauty go in. So that's kind of my goal with the art books.
I love that. You can't have beauty go out if you don't have beauty come in. That's a great lesson, and we should all consider that as we think about our educational choices for our children. Where can they find you? Like, do you have Facebook, Instagram? Is there a website? What's the best way for our listeners to connect with you if they want to learn more about?
So the website is www.delightfulartco.com. And I'm on Facebook as Delightful Art Co. And I have a group called Delightful Art Co. Fan Club. And that can give you some behind the scenes looks at what the students are doing and what they're learning each week. We post almost every week about what's going on in class and behind the scenes shots in there. And we're on Instagram as Delightful Art Co. as well. And you can buy our books on the website under the shop.
All right. Well, we'll get all of those links, of course, into the show notes. And Courtney, just thank you so much for sharing your experience today, your homeschooling journey, how we can incorporate art to really strengthen the subjects, and this great project that you've started on, helping hundreds of families, doing that on a semester basis. So go check them out. Go follow them on Instagram. Go join their Facebook group, and don't forget to catch Courtney on the Blessing and Motherhood podcast. January 2nd, where she'll discuss the Delightful Art Co. and how to incorporate art into your homeschooling, and even more in depth than we did today. So thank you so much, and God bless.
Thank you for having me.
All right. If you enjoyed today's episode of Refining Rhetoric, please be sure to share it with a friend. I wasn't the best artist. I go back and visit my mom's house, and she has artwork from my brother, John, who is an excellent artist, and myself, not quite as good, but art is such a way, even as an engineering mind, to just experience the nature of God's goodness in another level. So go check that out. And until next time, God bless.
Thank you for listening to Refining Rhetoric with Robert Bortons. Want more? Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. You can also follow us on social media to continue the conversation, and visit classicalconversations.com/rhetoric to find out how you can join a local homeschool community.